INFJs frequently downplay what they know. This behavior isn't rooted in insecurity or a lack of intelligence, but quite the opposite. INFJs tend to pretend to know less as a subtle form of emotional and social intelligence. They are deeply attuned to the energy in a room, the tone of a conversation, and the emotional state of those around them. Because of this, they often choose to pretend to know less in order to create space for others to express themselves, to build trust gradually, or to avoid creating tension. INFJs are private and reserved individuals. Sharing too much of what they know feels like revealing too much of themselves. Knowledge, especially deep or intuitive understanding, is personal for them. It's something that comes from inner reflection and observation over time. They may fear that fully revealing what they know could overwhelm others or be met with misunderstanding. Rather than risk being seen as arrogant or domineering, they err on the side of humility. Another reason INFJs pretend to know less is their natural tendency toward harmony. They dislike conflict and often feel that asserting what they know, especially if it contradicts someone else, might stir up unnecessary disagreement. They are more interested in connection than competition, and they often prioritize empathy over ego. In a conversation, they might notice someone feeling proud of their knowledge or trying to make a point. Rather than challenge that person, even if the INFJ knows more, they may choose to hold back, allowing the other person to feel heard and validated. Check out our newly released INFJ Mastery course, an INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video. INFJs are long-range thinkers who play the quiet game with skill. They often believe that understanding when to speak is more powerful than always speaking. By pretending to know less, they gather more information. People tend to reveal more when they feel like they're talking to someone who's merely listening rather than evaluating. INFJs use this as a way to learn the deeper layers of people and situations. It allows them to get to the emotional core of a matter without drawing attention to themselves. In many cases, INFJs have had past experiences where showing their full depth or insight led to being misunderstood or even alienated. They might have been called too intense, too serious, or too much. Over time, they learn to mask their knowledge, especially when they sense that the environment isn't ready to receive it. This act of pretending becomes a form of protection, a shield that helps them navigate a world that doesn't always welcome their complexity. This doesn't mean INFJs are deceptive. Rather, they're careful. They filter their expression through the lens of emotional impact, constantly asking themselves how their words will be received. It's not about hiding their intelligence. It's about choosing when and how to share it, based on what feels right for the moment and the person in front of them. Pretending to know less can also serve their inner idealism. INFJs are dreamers who often hold a vision of how the world could be. When they sense that others need to grow or reach conclusions on their own, they might stay silent on purpose. They understand that people value insight more when they arrive at it themselves. Rather than handing over answers, INFJs might pretend not to have them, guiding others indirectly through questions or subtle cues. There is also a deeply rooted philosophical aspect behind why INFJs often pretend to know less. For INFJs, knowledge isn't simply a tool for influence or recognition. It's sacred. It's a lens through which they understand the world and its hidden meanings. Because of this reverence, they don't toss their insights around casually. They often see their knowledge, especially the intuitive kind that comes from deep inner reflection, as something to be offered only when it can truly serve or heal, not when it might simply win an argument or prove a point. Pretending to know less is sometimes a way of protecting the sanctity of what they know from being cheapened by ego battles or shallow discussions. In conversations, INFJs can sense when others are speaking not to share but to be seen, heard, or validated. Rather than compete for space in that dynamic, they will often retreat into quietude, observing instead of asserting. This does not mean they're passive. It means they're discerning. INFJs intuitively understand that not everyone wants to hear the truth, especially when it threatens their sense of control or self-image. Pretending to know less allows them to engage with people without triggering defenses, making them seem non-threatening, which in turn opens others up more easily. This helps INFJs get closer to what really matters, understanding people, uncovering meaning, and planting seeds of transformation subtly, without force. INFJs know that influence doesn't always come from showing your hand. It often comes from waiting until the right moment to speak. When they do finally offer insight, it tends to be well-timed, poignant, and often deeply impactful. But they can only do that if they first create an environment where their words can be heard and respected. Pretending to know less helps them build that foundation. It's their way of tilling the soil before planting the truth. INFJs are highly sensitive to rejection and ridicule. They often see things differently from others, more abstractly, more spiritually, more holistically. When they do share what they know and it's dismissed or misunderstood, it hits them harder than most. These experiences teach them to become guarded, to test the waters before diving in. So, they mask their understanding behind a quiet smile, a curious question, or even apparent ignorance, not because they doubt themselves, but because they want to avoid unnecessary pain or alienation. Pretending to know less also reflects their natural desire to guide rather than dominate. INFJs are counselors, not commanders. They prefer to gently lead people toward clarity instead of handing them answers outright. They believe in the process of discovery, in letting others find their own truths. If they were to assert everything they see and understand immediately, they would rob people of the journey, and that feels wrong to them. By stepping back, by dimming their light just enough to make others feel comfortable shining theirs, they serve their deeper purpose as quiet guides and emotional mirrors. Socially, INFJs often feel like outsiders. Their way of thinking and perceiving life is intricate, abstract, and highly idealistic. They may feel that most people wouldn't truly understand their inner world, even if they tried to explain it. So they stop trying. Instead, they mirror others' energy, play along with surface-level conversations, and pretend they're learning something new, even if it's something they've long understood. It's a survival strategy, a way of blending in without betraying themselves. Ironically, this tendency to pretend to know less often makes INFJs more magnetic. Their humility, quiet depth, and mysterious air draw people in. Others can sense there's more beneath the surface, even if they can't quite put their finger on it. The INFJ becomes a puzzle, a calm presence who listens intently, asks the right questions, and seems to understand without needing to explain how or why. This subtle mystique is powerful, and INFJs know it. They use it not for manipulation, but as a soft instrument of connection, healing, and deeper knowing. At a subconscious level, many INFJs carry the belief that being truly seen, fully and deeply, can be dangerous. Not in a physical sense, but emotionally. Being known means being vulnerable, and for someone who processes life with such depth, this vulnerability is enormous. INFJs know that when they share what they really think or perceive, they're not just offering opinions, they're revealing parts of their soul. So instead, they often retreat into modesty, pretending not to know what they do, allowing others to project their assumptions onto them. In that projection, INFJs find a layer of protection, a way to observe and learn without being fully exposed. When in a group, INFJs will often sit quietly, offering encouraging nods, asking questions, or gently validating others' contributions while withholding their more complex insights. They know that in many social situations, being too perceptive can make others uncomfortable. It can create a gap, one where others feel seen too much, or as if their guard has been involuntarily lowered. INFJs sense this discomfort immediately and instinctively step back, downplaying their awareness to restore balance and protect the emotional equilibrium of the room. There's also a matter of timing. INFJs understand that truth, no matter how accurate or insightful, lands best when it is ready to be heard. They're not interested in being right for the sake of being right. They're interested in resonance, in impact, in timing their words so they do more than just inform, they transform. Pretending to know less allows them to bide their time. They wait until the other person is emotionally open, until the conversation has ripened enough for their insight to take root. Until then, they play the quiet observer, allowing others to underestimate them if necessary. In relationships, this attitude is even more pronounced. INFJs often sense their partner's unspoken fears, insecurities, or contradictions long before those things are ever voiced. Yet they say nothing. Not because they're indifferent, but because they know that speaking too soon might push their partner away. They pretend not to see the full picture, allowing space for others to discover themselves organically. This is how INFJs love, quietly, intuitively, and with a kind of emotional reverence that honors the other person's journey, even when they already know where it's going. INFJs live much of their lives on a subtle, invisible plane. They process reality through patterns, emotional currents, and unspoken truths. They often just know things without being able to explain how or why. But this kind of knowledge doesn't always translate well in conversations grounded in logic or surface-level thinking. So rather than risk being questioned, challenged, or labeled as irrational, INFJs pretend not to see what they see. They play the role of the inquisitive listener, asking questions they already know the answers to, gently steering conversations without ever fully revealing the depth of their perception. Many INFJs learned early on that showing the full extent of their insight often led to discomfort. Maybe they were told they were too intense, or that they think too much. Perhaps their observations made adults uncomfortable, or their emotional sensitivity was brushed aside. As a result, they began to withdraw into a quieter version of themselves, not because they lost their insight, but because they learned it wasn't always welcome. Pretending to know less became a way to avoid rejection, to stay close to people without alienating them. Even when INFJs pretend to know less, they're fully engaged. Beneath the surface, they are mapping emotions, sensing tensions, and reading subtext that others are blind to. They are choosing to be silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because they're listening more deeply than most. Their silence is not empty. It's full of calculation, compassion, and consideration. They are constantly weighing when to speak, how much to reveal, and what the emotional cost of their words might be. INFJs also pretend to know less when they are in unfamiliar or volatile environments. In competitive or hierarchical spaces, their natural inclination to observe rather than assert allows them to blend in while still gathering information. They may appear passive or agreeable, but internally they are making precise judgments about character, intentions, and dynamics. It's a form of self-protection, a quiet armor that allows them to understand the system before ever engaging it directly. They would rather appear uninformed than expose themselves in a space that doesn't yet feel emotionally or morally safe. The irony is that INFJs often long to be truly known, even as they hide. They yearn for someone who can see past their quiet deflection and recognize the complexity behind the calm demeanor. Pretending to know less can feel lonely. It can feel like being invisible in a room full of people, all while carrying insights that could shift everything if only there were room for them to be heard. But INFJs choose this invisibility not because they're weak, but because they're discerning. They've learned that not everyone deserves access to their inner world, and so they guard it carefully, revealing only what the moment, the relationship, or the soul in front of them is ready to receive. For INFJs, knowledge is not merely information. It is emotional, intuitive, often spiritual. It comes from their inner processing, where they connect patterns across time, experience, and feeling. It is not the kind of knowledge that is easy to package and deliver. So even when they know, they hesitate. They are often caught between their insight and their empathy. They feel the weight of speaking up, not only for how it will affect them, but for how it will impact others. They carry an acute awareness that every word has the potential to uplift or wound. This makes them careful, and in that carefulness, they sometimes default to pretending to know less, because that, paradoxically, can be the kindest thing to do in the moment. INFJs often sense they were born seeing the world differently. As children, they may have asked questions that made adults uncomfortable, or pointed out inconsistencies in others' behavior that no one else noticed. Over time, they may have learned to mask their inner knowing to avoid ridicule, or being labeled as weird or too much. The pretending became a form of self-preservation, one that stayed with them into adulthood. They learned that showing their true depth could isolate them, while dimming it could allow for connection, even if that connection felt shallow. INFJs also pretend to know less because they believe in transformation over transaction. INFJs aren't seeking to win conversations. They're not trying to dominate or persuade for sport. They want depth, they want change, and they want understanding. Sometimes, in order to reach that place with someone, they must first soften the path. Pretending not to know is a way of stepping aside so others can arrive at truths on their own, in their own time. In this way, INFJs don't lead with knowledge, they lead with presence. And that presence, though quiet, is often the catalyst for the most meaningful exchanges. Check out our newly released INFJ Mastery course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video.